The kids have these Amazon Fire tablets. They're not a patch on an iPad, but in the Amazon sales they're about a tenth of the price. And we've got these tough shell cases for them which come with a foot, but unfortunately, kids being kids, they've snapped off. So I decided to build them a stand so they can use them at the table. The first thing I did was to mock up some ideas in SketchUp. They were a bit too robust and not very foldable, although I quite like the Viking Chair idea. But in the end I was inspired by a plate holder. The end result didn't need to be pretty, so I started making some rudimentary ideas in cardboard to trial the idea. They turned out well, and I trialled it both with a cardboard version of the tablet and the real ones. Being lockdown season, it seemed like the perfect time to use up some scrap wood, and this pine furniture board was the ideal candidate. So I started by sanding from 60 grit up to 220, just initially to remove the varnish that was on there previously, but also to leave a nice finish. At first I thought I'd be using my card template to draw the outlines on the wood, but it was way too rough. But I used that to work out the measurements. I created a template in Word, which I might put a link to in the description, and then I printed that out. This actually turned out to be really well because I could arrange all 6 pieces to maximise the wood I had. Following that, I used my cheap Aldi scroll saw to cut these shapes out as close to the lines as I could. Sadly, just before the final cut, the saw broke. Not the blade, something inside has stopped turning, so I'll have to try and fix that later. In order to make sure each pair was symmetrical, I started by gluing them together. I put masking tape on one side and relied on the template on the other side, so the wood wouldn't get stuck together. So then they were in their final pairs so they could be shaped and sanded together. At first I decided against using my disc and belt sander because of the amount of dust it makes. I don't have dust collection in here yet. However, after sanding by hand for a little while, I soon changed my mind. Some incredibly hot work later, I split the pairs open, removed all the paper and masking tape, and then did some final sanding and shaping by hand. I numbered each of the pairs on the bottoms so I wouldn't get confused later. Now, not the most ideal and robust finish, but I decided that I would use kids' poster paints because I wanted to match the stands with the colour of the water bottles each kid has. So I used some cheap poster paints. Now, the idea using these wasn't to actually paint the wood as such, but just to load up enough pigment on the surface so that when I wipe the paint off, that it would have a staining effect. And actually, after 2 coats, that worked out really well. Again, in the spirit of using things up, I applied a couple of coats of acrylic sanding sealer from Chestnut, and then to fully protect it, some of the acrylic lacquer over the top of that. We'll have to see how that stands up to child abuse. At the start of this, I did consider some sort of fancy joinery to hold the parts together, but in the end, for practicality and to ease, both of construction and of use and storage, I just put the 2 parts together with some hinges. Now, a professional may have gone out their way to inlay the hinge, but I just put them on the surface. Using some squeeze clamps to hold the pieces together, I superglued the hinges onto the wood. This way they wouldn't move when I tried to drill the holes and finally screw in the hinges. And as a final touch, I decided they could use some rubber feet. I bought a massive bag of them in the past to repair a guitar pedal, so it was convenient that I had them. And in the end, I think they turned out well. They are functional rather than pretty, but then they are for the kids to destroy, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you for watching and goodbye.